You catch your reflection at some point and feel a quiet surprise. Not because something is wrong, but because the person looking back doesn't quite match the version of you living inside your head. This animated timeline shows exactly how that gap plays out. Psychology calls this subjective age, the age you feel versus the age you actually are. On average, middle-aged adults report a subjective age lagging 11.5% behind their chronological age. A 50-year-old usually feels closer to 44 inside. Look closely at the data divided by gender, and a clear pattern emerges. Across every cohort, women report feeling younger than men, and that gap continues to widen over time. The outside world tends to misunderstand this disconnect. When people act or feel younger than their calendar age, society dismisses it as denial, immaturity, or an inevitable midlife crisis. But that assumes the feeling is a flaw. What if this gap functions as a psychological defense mechanism? Walking around feeling roughly 35 years old, no matter what your driver's license says, is a feature of the human mind. It is designed to protect your long-term health. Human identity doesn't form in a smooth, continuous line from birth to old age. There is a specific window, usually in your late 20s and early 30s, when your core sense of self crystallizes. Psychologist Erik Erikson mapped this out in his psychosocial development model. He identified this period as the vital time when we resolve who we are as individuals, rather than simply accepting the role society expects us to play. It's the era when you figure out what you actually believe, the work that matters to you, and how you operate in relationships, without relying on a societal or parental script to guide you. The identity you form in this window doesn't freeze in the past. It becomes an identity operating system, the baseline software your brain defaults to for the rest of your adulthood. For Generation X, this operating system was forged in a very specific environment. As the latchkey generation, they routinely came home to empty houses and figured things out on their own. That forced early self-reliance and skepticism became hard-coded into their baseline software. That 35-year-old inside of you remains the foundational software running every decision you make today. Psychologist Susan Krauss-Whitborn developed identity process theory to explain exactly how your brain handles the tension between this established operating system and the reality of getting older. This diagram shows a process called identity assimilation. It's an efficient mechanism where your brain takes every new present-day experience and filters it straight through the core identity you already built. This stable core is constantly tested by daily volatility. If you're part of the sandwich generation, you might feel useful chasing a toddler around a park, and then feel your age heavily while managing an aging parent's medical decline on the exact same day. Those stressors stretch your felt age in conflicting directions, but identity assimilation acts as a tether, pulling you firmly back to that baseline operating system. The fluctuating ages you experience hour to hour are temporary reactions. Your identity anchor stays fixed at 35, protecting your core sense of self from the chaos of middle age. A 2023 longitudinal study tracked nearly 15,000 adults across several decades, mapping the physical consequences of this inner-outer gap. This chart visualizes the hard data from that study. Maintaining a younger subjective age correlates directly with better physical health, sharper cognitive function, and lower mortality rates over a 24-year timeline. Your internal feeling of youth acts as a psychological immune system. It defends your physical body against external wear and tear. The danger sits at the opposite extreme, in a process called identity accommodation. This is what happens when people abandon their core self to conform to society's anxious expectations and aging. Research from NYU documents the physical cost of this conformity. When you over-accommodate to cultural ageism, you don't just experience mental distress. You biologically accelerate the aging process you fear. The healthiest approach requires balance. You hold on to that 35-year-old inner foundation because it works, while updating it only when your physical realities demand it. Feeling 35 at age 50 demonstrates a resilient identity, one that actively works to protect your health as you continue to grow.